Where's that? The city of Sonoma? They must have some money. The population of the city of Sonoma? No, it's more than that. It's probably, I could tell you that. I'm gonna go 40. I'm gonna go 40. 32,000. Oh wait, Sonoma itself is 10,600, and Sonoma urban area 32,000. Wiki. For what? Oh yeah. I don't know if we have Jeff tonight. Or do we?
Hey, Ann?
Is Jeff joining us? Jeff will be joining us. So should we wait a moment?
Let's go ahead and start the meeting. Let's go ahead and start it and see how fast Jeff gets out there.
Good evening. Excuse me. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Arkin,
Here?
Commissioner Moss,
Here?
Chair Eisenman.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Pilch and Commissioner Donaldson are excused this evening.
So at this time, we welcome anyone to come up to the dais to comment on anything that's not already on the agenda. So if there are any members of the community here who wish to speak publicly, feel free to come forward. Seeing none, we'll move to item 5A, or I'm sorry, 5C and D. Please note that items 5A and B are going to be rescheduled for November 20th.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Both items pass, pending a 14-day appeal period.
So if you're here,
Congratulations.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you're here for 937 Stannage or 1010 Pomona, your projects have just been approved.
But there's still an appeal period.
There's
She
there's
said
still
that.
a 14-day appeal period, after which the decision becomes final. Thank you. Moving on to item 6A, Ales Unlimited conditional use permit and parking exception at 1501B Solano. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes,
We have a problem with that one.
you're recused on it. Well, then I guess this will have to carry over
It's on November 20th.
to November 20th due to a lack of quorum.
Sorry, within the 500 feet rule. Sorry.
We need a minimum of 3 commissioners to be able to approve it, and one of our commissioners will have to recuse himself, and we are down 2 members already this evening. So our apologies. We will move that to the November 20th
1 week from today, November
agenda.
20th.
So I can move that we continue this item to a date certain of November 20th.
It actually just carries forward.
It just
to
carries forward.
when
Okay,
there's
never
a
mind.
lack of quorum.
Done.
I'm sorry, I should have called you. I couldn't. I
No,
thought
no, that's
No,
we
fine.
have more
it-
commissioners here tonight.
Hold
Yeah,
on one
we
second.
didn't know.
There has been, in the past, the opportunity for those people here to come forward and speak. Is that something that would be?
There's no point without a quorum of commissioners
Well,
here.
maybe
Yeah.
someone who is not able to come the 20th, we should. Is there anyone interested in addressing the commission that will not be able to come back on the 20th? What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Well, the other commissioners are going to be here. They should probably take it sometime.
It would be best if you could come back next week. If that's not available, an email. The third alternative would be to do that subcommittee thing that we did before, which is to create a subcommittee for a few minutes, but then only 2 commissioners would really get the benefit of that. So it'd be better, an email or coming back would be better, but if those 2 aren't alternatives, then I guess the subcommittee would be a third alternative that you could do.
Would you be willing to send an email to staff and they would distribute it if you are not able to come on the 20th?
I'm going to be traveling, so I'm going to have to do that.
Okay. And they can get a hold of your email addresses through the website?
Yeah, on the website and the
Can I
postcard.
be bold? Do you have long comments?
I don't have a lot of comments other than the house directly behind.
Okay, hang on. I can't. So maybe you should just take his comments now and just incorporate in the minutes, or the other commissioners can watch it.
I don't like a precedent of setting doing these subcommittees.
No, I'm just saying take the testimony, because he's not going to be able to come back.
Yeah, but we have to create a subcommittee in order to take testimony like we did the last time, and I don't think that's a good precedent, so.
Do you think it would be more meaningful if I was here to speak instead of email?
If we could, we would. But what we're saying is we can't do that without doing a procedure that is somewhat suspect.
I'll tell you what, if you would like to talk about the process and not give us testimony,
Oh.
let's just,
I just want to admit one thing, I'm not going to even stand up. Okay, but I live right.
hold it. We have one member who can't hear what you're, no, excuse me. We have one member who cannot listen, and in order for this to happen, we have to create a subcommittee, and it's questionable about the legality of that. So I think what we're saying is that we need to hear your comments by email, unfortunately, or if you're able to make the next meeting.
If the gentleman is willing, I'm happy to sit out while your meeting continues, meet with him in the lobby, take down his comments, and we'll transcribe that for the commission.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Jeff. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to recuse myself, I've been close to the project.
Okay.
Hey,
Move-
Tom, you may want to go out and listen and talk to him.
It's for the Ales Unlimited on Solano Avenue. Ales Unlimited, new beer establishment.
Okay.
Let's move on.
So we're going to move on to item 6B, 730 Gateview Avenue. Design review, parking exception and variance.
The applicant is not yet here.
Maybe have the staff report.
Sure.
Please, thank you.
Before you this evening is a request for design review of parking exception and variance for a slightly larger, a 1,400 square foot addition, just a little over 1,400 square feet, which also includes a secondary dwelling unit. The addition to the main home includes stairs, hallway, 2 bedrooms, and a half bath. The secondary dwelling unit will include a bedroom, bathroom, living, dining area, kitchen, and 1 off-street covered parking space. The lot is 5,650 square feet and has frontage on both Gateview Avenue and Pierce Street. Variance is requested to allow rear yard setback reduction on the Pierce Street side so that the setback is consistent with other homes which face Pierce Street. Due to the size of the addition, a parking exception is requested for the 1 additional parking space that would be required for the main residence, where 2 are required, as there isn't enough space physically on site to accommodate that second off-street parking space. The building mass and form have been designed to step with the topography of the property. A series of stairs designed to blend in with the grade of the lot are also proposed. The north stairs will lead to the entrance to the second unit, and the south stairs will lead to a courtyard which will be shared by the main residence and second unit. A new crawl space will be constructed on the existing home. And as I noted, a new hallway will connect the existing residence with the newly added area. While the addition is largely focused at the rear of the home, it has been designed to have a relationship to the Pierce Street frontage. The applicant is proposing to maintain similar roof lines of the existing home, including a front gable detail over the living room and the second unit. A hipped roof is proposed over the main addition area. A projecting window is proposed for the kitchen and the second unit. Parking for the main residence is provided in the attached single-car garage, which is accessed off of Gateview Avenue. The second off-street parking space will be provided for the second unit and accessed from Pierce Street. Due to the overall size of the addition, as I mentioned before, the code requires a second off-street parking space. However, the slope of the lot is quite difficult in terms of accommodating that second off-street parking space. Due to the unusual character of the lot having both double frontage and nearly 30% slope from Gateview Avenue to Pierce Street, the applicant is seeking a variance for a rear yard setback reduction. In this case, the rear yard faces Pierce Street, which would require a 20-foot rear yard setback. However, to have a relationship with adjacent homes, the applicant has applied for a variance to reduce the rear yard setback to 6 feet 7 inches. In the materials submitted, the applicant has indicated that this allows the home to maintain a consistent appearance with neighboring homes on Pierce Street, and it also helps to preserve the neighbor views on either side of the site. Given the unique site circumstances of both a double frontage and site slope, a variance has been applied, and while the home is in the Hillside Overlay District, typically a use permit is pursued for a reduction in front yard setback. It's never been pursued for a rear yard setback. And given those site characteristics, staff thought a variance would be more appropriate for the setback reduction at the rear yard.
So just a point of clarity, Pierce Street is included in the Hillside District.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's a Gateview address. And
I know
then-
that, but,
yeah,
but
and
I'm
it's-
saying for all the other houses that only front onto Pierce
Yeah.
Street, they are also in the Hillside District.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You are one H, so.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah, it's R1 with the hillside.
with an H
overlay.
overlay.
And bear with me for a second. I want to bring up some of the computer's a little slow right now. The applicant provided a photo simulation. So the image on the right side is the frontage from Pierce as it exists currently. It has obviously a retaining wall and red fence. It's a red curb. And the image on the left is a simulation with the addition that once, with the house as it's proposed. One thing, it's included in the staff report, but there's actually, it's a red curb because there is an AC Transit bus stop. That bus stop is going to be relocated just a little bit north, I believe, of the site. Our transportation planner, AC Transit, have been talking about that.
So one question I had is, what is the front yard setback on Pierce Street? Not for accessory buildings, but for the houses. Is it?
It would be the standard 15 feet, although I'm not sure, given the age of the homes there, that the existing homes comply with that 15-foot front yard setback.
And within the Hillside Overlay District, we can reduce that with a use permit.
With a use
Conditional
permit.
use permit. But because this is technically not the front yard of this house, but its rear yard, it needs to be done with a variance.
Right. No, I guess where I'm going is so if we're treating it as the front yard, consistency with other homes on Pierce Street, not just their garages and accessory buildings, but the front of the home.
Mhm.
If this is asking to be closer to the curb than what a front yard setback would be. Okay.
And when Jason gets here, I believe he's taken some measurements to, put a little more
Validate.
context. Yeah, yeah.
And the parking exception is because this site currently features one off-street parking space,
That's correct.
and we're creating a second off-street parking space.
For the secondary
Okay.
dwelling unit. Yeah.
And the reading is that because that second dwelling unit is being developed in 2013, that it requires 2 parking spaces, but the original dwelling built pre-1978 only requires 1.
Well, I believe it's actually pre-1958.
1958, sorry.
Yeah.
yes.
There is only a requirement for 1 off-street space for the main residence and then 1 off-street space for the second unit.
Okay, so only 2 are required?
Yeah.
Okay.
But because of the overall size that's being added, so it's 1,441 square feet, and then once you subtract the second unit out of that, that leaves you with well over 700 feet. The code requires that you provide that second off-street parking space for the main residence.
With an
that's-
addition of that
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you. That actually clarifies it well.
Can you bring up Google Earth under?
Sure.
Because something's not jiving with what the drawing shows and what I see. I'm trying to get a handle on that.
It's funny, that's where I was going.
Google Earth.
Just so I'm clear, you want the aerial, not the street view?
Aerial.
Okay.
Because what I want to do is compare the frontage of the houses. And it just appears from what I see here and what I see drawn, there's some interesting conditions.
So I have the Google up on the screen.
Google Earth, not Google Maps. Google Earth, there you go. If you want to hit that arrow next to the north, again, just to the left, there's an arrow, there you go. House on both sides, you outline that, that's what I'm looking at.
So what I'm curious is if those houses are set 6 to 7 feet from the property line back, or if this one's asking to come even more forward of those, what seems to be kind of the natural,
That's
um,
what we're looking at here.
right.
And this one seems to be further back. It's hard to tell.
I'm curious if the survey that was provided locates the right houses.
Nope. It does not.
Is the owner here for this project? No owners?
I think Jason should be here around 7:30.
I think we dock his pay.
On the cover sheet, he's actually provided a building envelope.
Ah, yes, that's a good,
And that's what I'm looking at here.
and Phil, you're questioning the accuracy of that relative to the
Is it-
Google Earth?
It looks like the building to the north is a little bit too far forward, but was there any consideration, since Jason's not here, any consideration to lot split here? I know it's 3,700 that we don't allow, but then the lots adjacent to it are 37, or less than 3,700 and split.
Yeah,
Well,
we can't do it.
Yeah, the code actually, now the code is
can't.
pretty specific about a 3750 minimum lot.
Because the
No, we
argument-
can't.
Yeah, you can, because the argument, the argument is, it's a grid system that's already pre-existing, other lots are substandard, you can grant subdivision on this. If there's so many lots in a certain area that are the same size or same subdivision. I thought this one, I know it's really nice.
So it's interesting, the parcel to the south actually has a garage that's in the city right away.
Yeah. I mean, take a look at the lot next to it, it's smaller, it's been subdivided.
Right, these two are too small to be subdivided, so they made them through lots.
Right, well, that one, the one on the other side, is also subdivided. In smaller lots.
Yes, but it's only, along this stretch, only these two adjacent parcels are the two that aren't, that don't have rear property lines.
Well, while we're sitting here waiting, are there examples of projects like this that have been in the last 5 years put before the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Not that I'm familiar with.
Yeah,
This is,
we don't have many of these lots.
yeah, I think that we have very limited double frontage lots, and of those that we do have, I don't think they have topography that's quite this significant.
I mean, it's a pretty interesting idea in terms of the scale of the residences too are pretty good size.
Well, why don't we
Yeah.
take a 10-minute recess till
I agree.
7:30 and then pick this up then? I mean, we need Jeff for the next item, 2 items really, so there's no point in
Continuing the
trying to
dialogue.
jump ahead, so.
Do you want to go to the final, in communications or anything? We can go about?
I don't think I have any communications for this evening.
Special meeting next week.
Yeah, there is the council appeal, 726 Cerrito Street and St. Mary's are both going on Monday evening as public hearing items.
And,
Ordway, well, 1017 Ordway is coming back to you in December. That's the roof deck. And 1008 Ordway, which was slated to carry over due to a lack of quorum, that'll be before you next week.
And the 1017, there was no action taken by the city council other than to send
Other
it
than to
back
remand it back.
for re-review.
correct.
Got it.
why don't we just, any full pause, say that they redesigned the stairs up to the deck?
That's why it was sent back to us.
Mhm.
Did they offer any direction? I guess
Um,
maybe I shouldn't ask that right now. We'll pick it up in December. Sorry. Okay,
So if we take a
recess
2
till 7:30?
Do we need to vote on it?
Thanks.
What happened was, we don't have enough commissioners to take any action on it, so it's going to carry over to next Wednesday, November 20th. No, unfortunately not. Yeah, it's scheduled for 7 o'clock. Sure.
One question out there, so we don't.
No. They're, I can show you on the computer if you want to see. I guess. My email address is on the bottom of the postcard. Are you here to which? It is for Stannage or? Oh, okay, so this is for Stannage. Okay. I can show you the plans. What they're doing is they're building off of the back.
my project. I'm working.
I'm trying to get you.
You shouldn't look at it because it's an Albany.
comes out to me 5 o'clock and says, I'll need you to work on a bunch of stuff tomorrow morning. Like I was up there, I'll go to 10 minutes at 5 o'clock. So I spent an hour and a half doing it. She didn't come in the next morning. So then the next night she came to, well, show them my driver, the other driver goes, okay, I'm going to show you, this is what I want you to do, I'm showing them. And I said, oops, I just did it for you. Okay, now, move this over here. No, I just did it for you. Which computer program do you use? Huh? Sketch is so barbaric. So, Commissioner Eisman and I decided that we'd go ahead and appoint you for the commission, the subcommittee on.
Wait a minute. That's not what I get for leaving the room. I think that needs to be tabled since we don't have hardly enough people here to hear just about anything. Maybe we just adjourn this meeting right now.
I don't know where Jason is.
Yeah.
I think we just moved
We-
this meeting to the 20th.
Well, we could tell them all that we've just closed the meeting,
We can vote it down and just move on.
or we could approve it and move on.
Then we go to city council.
Well, he may have to,
He's across the street, helping.
oh, that on the
Tell
way.
them, pay the bill and get over there.
for calling. And Jeff's,
Next one. Okay, good. We were just about to adjourn.
One of the things that Anna asked for.
Yes.
If we have this, I know it's in the report, actually, I had a hard time figuring out the square footage between the existing and the new. Do we have that? Yeah. I couldn't find it in the staff report, but, you have square footage to request.
So the existing square footage is just over 1,600 square feet,
1609.
1,609. And with the proposed addition, it would be a little over 3,000.
So it's 1440.78 for the new.
Mhm.
So as a rule, on the 220 square feet for the garage, if they're only providing 180 square feet for a garage, so you just count the 180, do they get the full 220?
They get up to 220 max. If they had one car garage that, was less than that, they get whatever that is, so they would get the 180. If it was over 220, they would take the 220 and the resultant area would count towards FAR.
You know, that's one of the things I think we need to talk about on the parking thing, is that really it handicaps two-car garages.
Yeah, because half of it would count towards your FAR.
Are we still in recess?
We're still in recess. So when they come back and we open up, we got to flush letters, everything else, you know.
For those at home watching, we're waiting for the architect to come and present their project on this next item.
commission is nice, since you guys are architects also. There's the new code that's coming into effect, heavily going to affect the soils. A soils engineer is telling me today if liquefaction is going to have to be tested more. And the structural requirements are going to be very conservative for liquefaction. He was suggesting on the project I'm doing, valid, we go and do a 40-foot deep drilling.
So Berkeley has a liquefaction zone?
Huh?
Does Albany have a liquefaction zone? Have we identified a,
That'd be up to staff.
so when you're submitting to Berkeley, you have to identify if your area falls within, they've got maps that have been created.
Yeah, there's a, the maps are Bay Area wide, so,
So
yeah, it's,
Albany also is gonna move to that requirement as well?
It's actually a CDC requirement.
I'm not sure, actually, I'll have to defer that to Jeff. One of the other items going forward on Monday is the building code updates to be amended to the municipal code.
so are there members of the public here to speak on 6B? Because I don't, I see one person in the room, but I don't think he's here for that item. I didn't think so.
Here for the council's item.
Okay. So, no speakers?
I don't have any speaker cards for
Okay.
Gateview.
Right across the street. Was he eating dinner?
Yeah, he was at Zaki's Kebab House.
Well, that's not a good enough excuse.
I move we move over there and have our meeting over there. I'm hungry too.
I mean, I'm serious, you know, we're citizen volunteers, we don't do this for our health, we, you know,
Well, it's only been 15 minutes.
I'm looking at 20.
And did you speak with them?
I talked with him, he said he was going to get his check and head over.
For the record,
Yeah, I mean, I'm 2 days on the road, my son just got back from being away 4 months, I really would love to be home with him.
I had one meeting in Kensington the night my son was leaving for college, and I couldn't get out. They would let me.
Yeah,
It's like,
And what is the, how heavy is the agenda on the 20th?
well, you know what? If you have to go, you have to go. You just have to not have fun. I mean, we all have families. That's important.
well, is Jeff available to move on to these other items?
Yeah.
Because let's do that, please, thanks. Oh, here he is, let's just go.
And he didn't even bring us any food, I tell you.
It's in the car. I didn't get to eat it.
We're all complaining because we skipped dinner to come.
You skipped dinner to come.
Okay.
That makes 5 of us.
So we've had the staff report on item 6B, 730 Gateview.
Oh, no, I'll have
And we'll ask the architect to come forward and present their project.
So Jason called us for Calvin and Amy Tran. The project is at 730 Gateview. There's an existing house there, and Calvin and Amy would like to add to it in a way that allows them to join their parents at this house. And so the idea of a secondary dwelling and an addition that expanded the existing home kind of fused. And the site has such a large drop from Gateview to Pierce that if we added a two-story element to the back of the Gateview house, we would simply be adding square footage, but not anything of any quality or anything that would work with the way the land falls. So we came up with the idea of having a one-story addition that splits about a half a flight of stairs down from the lower level, and then maintaining the apex of all the roofs lower than the existing upper floor deck, in such a way that it could not possibly have any effect on neighbors' views. And then looked at the pattern of development along Pierce Street and saw how the other houses were developed on Pierce Street, elevated from Pierce, bunkered garages in either at zero setback or some distance back. I looked at the forms of the houses along Pierce Street and saw that, you know, most of them were one story, over and understory. And so taking all of those concepts together, we then worked on the plan with the client, and the result is a house that creates a courtyard between this secondary dwelling of the 649 square foot secondary dwelling that fronts Pierce, and the addition that webs between the 650 square foot accessory unit. This courtyard is a nice feature because the house that is immediately to the south presents a very blank facade, and one that shadows the property pretty significantly. So by pulling away from that, we've got some open space that has a chance to be used and be sheltered. The existing house has one parking space. All of the parking along Gateview is typically one parking space in, whether the houses are on the upslope or the downslope. All the houses along Pierce Street also provide one parking space, typically under or in a garage that is 0 or less than 0 setback from the property line. So when we looked at that pattern, we thought, well, we would be able to provide a second parking space for the accessory dwelling unit. We wouldn't easily be able to provide a third parking space for the original house, and there would be no effective way to add a second parking space off Gateview. So our thought process was, if we had added to the house at Gateview, let's say a 400 or 500 square foot addition to the house at Gateview, we would not have any way of providing a second parking space for that house. The age of the house, there was never, there was never 2 cars. So the parking that we're providing is for the accessory dwelling unit. I did look at, is there another way to add another parking space? And we would make more curb cut along Pierce, and we would have to excavate that much more, another 200 square feet of interior space times about 10 feet of vertical cut on the back. And we would, whatever curb cut that we made to have the parking for the third space, we would be taking away a street spot. Calvin and Amy's property is unusual right now in that it was completely striped along Pierce for a bus stop. It was done without any notice to his parents. And as a result, that whole stretch of that property appears not to have ever lavished any love on Pierce Street. And so the other thing we looked at was how to soften the requirement for retaining that earth. And the idea of making the cut for the driveway eliminates the need for a retaining wall of whatever width approach we have to the garage. And then having the stairs go parallel to the street further softens the effect of the need for retaining wall. And so you can see I think there was I think we did a photo montage sort of side by side showing the existing red 2-level fence and then our 3D model showing how cut back and carved down the wall that is there now would be with our scheme. And right now, all of the short garden walls that are along Pierce Street are all encroaching into the public right-of-way. So we're not necessarily asking to have that continued, but we would need to have two walls that would return perpendicular to the street at the property lines so that we could connect our complying retaining walls to the walls that exist north and south. I tried to work with, a building forum that if this were a separate house, it would look like it would look like an addition to Pierce Street. The property that's immediately to the north didn't always have two houses. The 725 Pierce used to go all the way through to Gateview and did not have a house. 728 Gateview is more recent than 1951. It's something more recent than 1951. The Sanborn maps that I pulled up show the pattern of development along Pierce. You can see as you get close to, is it Jackson? The street, the next largest street that is to Washington. You can see the first three properties on Pierce have garages with zero setback. And I think the land has moved, and I think all of the garages have less than zero setback to the property lines. Our survey showed that the house at 733 Pierce had the existing garages at least 3 feet over the property line, as are all of the site retaining walls for the entire block. On balance, the request for the reduced rear yard, I'm looking at it more as a front yard for Pierce Street and asking you to think of it that way. In doing so, the only house that would present a rear to Pierce Street would then be the one that is oddly labeled 733 Pierce, but is also identified as another address on Gateview, and it's the one immediately to the south. All of the other houses north and south of this property front Pierce Street and present fronts to Pierce Street, and are all 1 story over a garage or 1 story over a tall understory. So I think the massing of this is a nice continuation of Pierce Street, and I submitted a lot of photographs of the character of Pierce Street to help you see what it was we were trying to pick up on. And we put elements in the design that treat this more as a front than as a back. Things like the little covered porch, a projecting window at the kitchen, and even just the way the massing is done to sort of cascade it and have it step with the site. And I think our site section really shows how we fit the addition to the site, and that's that site section looking south on sheet 1.2. And you can see why the garage from Pierce Street would not qualify as FAR. You can see that where we placed all of the floor levels, we were really trying to track with the existing topography to minimize earthwork and the need for retaining walls. And you can see from that site section that the ridge of all of the addition is entirely below the level of the deck that is on the main floor of the existing house. I think that's I'll let you guys ask questions.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Your site plan, the first set of the drawings, indicates 725 Pierce Street as having a setback from the front property line, which appears to be very close to, if not exactly the same as what you're proposing as the setback for the living room above. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And okay, thank you.
Did you have any questions, Commissioner Moss?
Not right
Thank you. We may bring you up for questions
Okay, thank
after
you.
we've
Thank you.
opened.
I've got to ask a question. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to this. I'm looking at this is a 3,750 square foot lot.
No, it's a 5,650 square foot lot. It's a big lot.
It's 50 by,
It's,
you're right, this
yeah,
is a bigger lot.
it's a big lot. Yeah.
50 by 117.
Yeah, the center line average, it's 108 and 117, so the center line average is 112 and a half times the 50-foot width. It's 5650. Something like
R1H is
that.
Yeah,
R1H.
It's R1 with the hillside overlay.
okay. So the minimum lot size is 3750.
That's correct.
R1 is 2,500.
No, it's 3750.
It's throughout the city, it's 3750.
That's right, we were talking about changing it.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open it up to the public, see if there are any interested parties in speaking to this item. No one out in the lobby. Seeing none, let's bring it back to the commission for discussion. We'll, sure.
I couldn't find findings with variances, that's all. Do you have it?
It's pages 16 to 25 in the report, so it's at the end of the report.
What's that?
At the end of the staff report, pages 16 to 25.
That's the general findings, but I believe the
Oh,
findings-
the variance findings were on page 12 and 13? I think they're on page 12 and 13. I think.
Yeah, page 14 and 15.
14 and 15, thank you. Thank you.
While you're reading that, can we excuse the architect from the dais and, thank you. I suspect you will be coming back up. Okay. So how would we like to start this conversation? You had some questions. Do you want to start with the thoughts from the top of your head, or do you want to develop them while Commissioner Arkin begins?
Well, I can start with us. It's not really complete. I understand the concern about the parking along Pierce Street, but I would feel that you would make the effort to try to find that second parking spot along Pierce. If you talk to the neighbors, nobody wants to park on Pierce. It's a freeway that there's a lot of side swiping and a lot of accidents. People park on the sidewalk to get out of the street. When I was sitting there, I almost got side swiped. So it's one of those things that I think that you mentioned you don't think you have room to do it, but it certainly appears that you, at 50-foot frontage, you should have room to put 2 parking stalls off the street, off-street parking stalls, and not require the parking exception. In that case, to me, it would make what you're trying to do there a little bit more palatable, because it is a big second unit. And we want to encourage second units, but also the rules say the second unit has to be subservient in size to the primary residence. And in this case, it's unique what you're asking for. I don't like it when there's a list of things you're asking to skirt the requirements on. And parking, I mean, I can see the variance, I can see the setback, but the parking is so critical there. And especially the off-street parking, I personally would, if I was building my house there, I would want 2 off-street parkings because I know how bad it is along that street. In fact, I know how bad it is in most places in Albany. If you don't have two off-street parking, it's a real plus. And by only having one off-street parking, you're contributing to the impact to the neighbors. Now, I know we can do parking studies and stuff, but I also know being out there, how difficult it is to park. So I would like to see you try to get that second parking stall. I know there's some excavation, but that's just a cost of construction. The stairs are out both sides of the fronts. I think if you rework those a little bit, you could have that second parking stall or parking spot, whether it's a pad or if it's a enclosed one. I'm not asking for both of them to be enclosed, but if you provided a pad and a garage, then I think that would make it a lot easier to make findings for not having to make findings for a parking exception in this case. I like the design. I do have a lot of concerns about having two large houses butted together. But I can see that one of the things we were just talking about on the commission was 0 lot lines. And that's, to me, an acceptable solution. I like the idea of what you're trying to do here. I hope it's not 2 rental units, because it has been suggested that these would be 2 rental units.
It can't be.
I know. There's a lot of things that can't be. But yes, and again, that's the rules of the second residential unit. One has to be a primarily occupied. And usually, I think the code, we tried to say that the code said that the larger unit had to be occupied.
But that's not true.
Right. No,
No, owner only has to occupy one of
One
them.
of
It
the
doesn't
units.
specify.
yeah, and one
Which
that I know
one?
we did on Curtis, that became an issue. So I think that case, they had a small little backyard accessory that was their second dwelling unit, and then they rented out the front, and then they disappeared from the back and rented that out. And I have to back off and look at that, but, so then I'm wrong. The second unit, or either of the units can be owner occupied. But again, I think that I like the design. I like the idea of what you're doing. I just, because of parking, I think we need to find a second pad or a second location. I think as far as the design, I find it acceptable. It meets our codes, and I like the design. I like the idea of the courtyard. So I just think the stairs from the street up need a little bit of work. And by having 2 stairs, you're making it pretty dominant on the street, the stairs. I understand why you want the second one down from the courtyard, but I think you'd want to make that secondary only because people walking down the street will think there's 2 houses. I'm going to walk up this staircase, I'm going to walk up this staircase. So somehow play it down on the second one up to the courtyard. That's my comments for now.
All right. Well, I largely agree with Phil, but I have a couple exceptions and a concern. But let me just say, I like this proposal. I like a lot of things about it. I'll start by saying how wonderful it is that we're adding a dwelling unit, and that's something we're encouraging in our community. I can support a variance here because it is a unique lot, and if everyone who owns a lot that fronts onto 2 streets rushes down here to add a second unit on the back or front half, depending on how you look at it, that would be fine. I also think that the pattern of development supports that here. That if this did have an address, a separate address onto Pierce Street, it would have the hillside overlay on the front yard, and we'd be able to approve a garage that extends into the existing setback. So no trouble there. I also have no trouble with the parking exception, and my reasoning here is that the upper site, the primary dwelling unit here, by adding space to that, we would normally want to see a second parking space provided, but we have time and again exempted that second parking space when the physical constraints of adding that were too great, and I think that applies here. and rightfully a second unit on a site where the primary dwelling unit predates 1958, only one parking space is required. So following that line of logic, the single parking space for the lower lot is acceptable, and a wider curb cut could lead to losing a street space. So we have I think a net balance here. And design review, I very much like the moves that have been made here. I think the symmetry about the garage with the two stairways is a lovely little design device that works on the hillside here. Which brings me just to one concern, which I actually have one more thing that I like, which is the way that you're lining the main body of the second unit up with the neighboring houses. And that's my concern, is that I'm not sure it does that. If I look at Google Earth and measure from the front of 725, the entry there out to the property line, or not to the property line, but the edge of the sidewalk, I'm scaling more like 22 feet, and if we give that right of way from the edge of the side back a very generous 6 feet, that only leaves us 16, and you've labeled this front yard setback as being closer to 11 feet. And I just am nervous about approving something that could be very different from what we think it is. And I don't like to bring this up, but I think we have to be cautious about how we proceed with this. I'm happy to make a motion approving it, saying that the upper story does not extend any closer to the sidewalk than the adjacent building, because I think that pattern is one that you're trying to support, and it's an appropriate one for the streetscape along Pierce. So my only concern is that that is indeed the case.
All done?
Yep.
Okay. We've been talking a lot about infill lots and providing additional housing in Albany, and I think this is a perfect lot for what you're intending to use it for. I actually feel that creating a facade on Pierce Street is actually giving back to Pierce Street. It's filling in an empty space and creating kind of a rhythm, a pattern of houses that I think is just going to be better for Pierce Street as well. I am also willing to support the findings for the variance for the rear lot because of that. But I agree with Commissioner Arkin that according to the drawings, according to what we're seeing, it feels like the volume, the massing of your house is coming in front of all the other houses. So if you were to drive down the street, you would see house after house, somewhat spaced so far off the street, your house would come in front of that, and the massing of it might, it wouldn't be appropriate to find the variance for it to be that close to the street. So I'm also recommending that we push it back so that it's in plane with the adjacent properties.
And if I could be clear, you're referring now to the living room and kitchen, not the garage, that
Yes.
you have no trouble with the garage coming forward?
Correct.
Okay.
Because other accessory buildings are right up on the property line, and so that's appropriate. So I agree with Commissioner Arkin. I was curious, actually, I have a question for staff. Would it ever be appropriate to make the larger unit now the primary unit instead of the original? How would these be addressed? Is it Unit A and Unit B from Gateview? Is it?
I think we would want to address the Pierce Street side as a Pierce Street property. We make it just kind of obvious for an emergency responder or someone from out of town who puts the address in Google Earth that they get in the right place. Google Maps.
Which is an assignment of an address, even though it's on a property that has another address, and we have that all over town.
Right,
Right.
yeah, it's not, it doesn't have any legal standing, it's just to get people to the right place.
Right.
I've worked with cities where they, a corner lot, they require that the address be, even if the front door faces one way, the driveway, if it's on the other side, the address has to be where the driveway is because of the emergency vehicles can come in, and so they know where to look for the entrance. That was what I was asking for here. Okay.
I just want to mention that, the reason I'm talking about this second parking stall, this is a 1,600 square foot unit. It's not a small unit. And this is a heavily impacted street. It's really kind of a through street, not necessarily a street you want to park on. So that's why it's a big plus to have a second spot, but 1,600 plus square foot. And the primary resident, or the original resident, is what, 1,200, 1,300 square feet? So, this is a big impact to the neighborhood as far as the size. And I think that it would be sorry not to have that second off-street.
So, but only 649 square feet is the accessory dwelling unit, right?
But this is not an accessory dwelling unit. We're really looking at this as a second home.
I think it is it's an accessory dwelling unit.
It doesn't meet any of the standards of an accessory dwelling unit. It's not subservient. It's not under 649 square feet. It's in the setbacks. It doesn't really qualify as an accessory structure.
Staff, care to offer an opinion here?
Sure. It is under the 650 square foot threshold regulated in the secondary unit section of the code.
It can be attached.
It's
To a main
attached.
dwelling.
I'm sorry, what's the square footage of the second unit, the new unit?
I believe the second unit is right at
1,440.
649. No. The overall addition is 1,441. 649 of that is for the second unit, and the remaining 700 is for the main residence. So it's in addition to both the main residence, and then there's the secondary unit.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me on this.
So what are we identifying as the main residence? Is it,
The house that faces Gateview.
Yeah, so
Right,
this
okay.
here is the existing main residence. This is all the new building area, and then this is the second unit here. This is the additional living area for the main residence.
Ah. Yeah.
so the main residence will continue to be larger in square footage?
Yes, that's correct.
So there's no doorway between the new unit and the existing unit?
I believe there is an interior doorway that will connect the 1.2.
Where are they?
He's sheet 1.2?
Oh, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the lower floor plan too. Well, I'm looking at your floor plan, and I don't see any doors down that hallway.
So we can do an accessory dwelling unit that interconnects to a house,
Right.
and we can make one of those separate from the house, but attached. So we show a plan that shows 649 square feet is separate, and we need that to meet the standard if they were separately controlled.
Okay, because,
The applicant does not want to do that, they want to have the
I'll tell you what, actually, I'm
Yeah,
going to
I-
ask that you come up and repeat what
Yeah.
you've said into the microphone, please.
I see the small drawing, I see your large drawing.
Sure.
The wall that I see in your large drawing is at the existing wall of the existing house. And then there's a stairway that goes up from the lower unit up to that.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out where you're saying these doors are that separate the two units. This
Are you-
separates this into
So
649 square
in
feet.
the architectural plan that we present on sheet through 2.1, we don't have any doors that separate the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit, from the main house. That is something that I understand is allowed. We've done it on other ADUs. They can be interconnected. But we also want to make it credible that it could be and function as 649 square feet as an accessory dwelling unit. We don't want to create a precedent where you're promoting or allowing 675 square feet or 800 square feet for the accessory dwelling unit. So the plan on sheet 1.2 shows exactly how it would be severed and would function as a one-bedroom apartment, would have a bathroom, it would have a living room and dining and kitchen, so that it falls into the standard if someone wants to have not an extended family live there, but two separate adult tenants.
Well, it would seem to me that if we're asking for a second unit that's that square footage, then it needs to be separate. It needs to be.
But that's not the case in other applications, but I'll let you address that.
I know of one that we did up on Ordway where.
I did one 2 years ago, so I
It was
know.
within an existing house, and the family's, mother-in-law, literally, the mother-in-law lives in that back unit that we created, but there's no door
Right.
between her unit and the kitchen right now, but there could be.
Yeah, and that was part of the existing structure. This is
Right.
added on to the structure. And so the difference for me is, where is the structures? I'm being told that it's 649 square feet, but the drawings don't represent that. Then I'm being told that they want this flow through all one, which basically is fine. It's a one unit. It's one house. It's not two houses. It's not an accessory dwelling unit. It's just a house with two kitchens.
Well, if we're providing a second address, we're providing address from Pierce Street, it really does need to be two houses, actually, at that point, because there is a bit of confusion, I think,
Sure.
for emergency response vehicles. I mean, this is an unusual circumstance in which there are two facades, there's two, it feels like the project really does need to be able to be severed, and potentially that is a door that you could leave open, but there has to be some way. I'm wondering if there's needs to be a fire-rated wall, if there's.
No.
It doesn't.
Not if
No,
it's
our
the same
code does
unit.
not require
Yeah.
that.
Again, my concern is that all of a sudden this thing gets shut off and we got two large houses that are just two large houses. Or if it's what you say it is, it's 649 square feet, that's great. Then I'm going to recommend a deed restriction.
That's
Just gonna
included in
have
the
it
draft
anyway.
That's what I'm
conditions of
saying, I'm going to
approval.
support the deed restriction on this. That says that structure shall remain 649 square feet. What you do with it afterwards, I don't know. I'm just reflecting some of the fears I hear from the neighbors, that they're concerned that this is just going to become two large rental units, and it's not going to become a primary residence and a secondary residence. So that's the problem I'm having with this. Now, if it truly is a 649 square foot unit, and we're going to commit to that, then I have no problem with the one parking spot off of Pierce. But what I saw on the plans were conflicting with what I'm hearing in the testimony.
Could we agree that that would be remedied, not even by the ADU plan that we submitted, but simply by having a door at the end of that hallway?
Point
Oh, sorry. Right.
At that location.
at that location.
Yeah. And the fact that there is this other way to use.
So where's your bedrooms for that unit?
This is the bedroom.
That's not labeled a bedroom.
No, but
Oh, so you snuck in another bedroom. Oh, wait a minute, what do we have here? I mean, why didn't you put the door farther back and include that one bedroom into the?
because that's not how this family wants to use this
I
house,
see.
right? I mean, this
But-
is an
But
extended
that's how
family.
you're showing it on the drawing, so I think there needs to be some consistency. So if
Yeah.
they're asking for a 650 square foot addition, then that's what we need to see in the drawing.
And if you're going to make it a bedroom, make it a bedroom. But show us what the configuration is going to be, so we have something on record that says this is our configuration.
This is the plan this applicant wants,
Okay,
okay?
they want,
That's what
they want a big house.
So
They want
this
a big
isn't a
house.
Okay.
second addition. This
So
is
with a big house?
Large house.
Yeah, so with one large house,
But with
three-
multi-generational family, two kitchens, living largely separate, sometimes living together. That's what they want. There's no other way to get a second kitchen in a single-family house.
You know, you've been here enough, you know our issues.
Sure.
We try to make this fit our code, and that's
Oh,
what
sure.
we're asking you to do, is to try to make it fit our code and give us what fits our code.
Sure.
And that's all we're trying to do, whether it's a second unit, then only one off-street parking is 649, only one off-street parking is required. You
Sure.
got it, boom, done. But that's not, and
Well-
I hear that from you, but I don't see it.
Sure.
And so, you know, this becomes part of our records.
Sure. Well, I would like to address the concern about the third parking space. I would like to address the concern about the setback aligning with the house next door, which I believe is it's a little less than a 4-foot misalignment. In other words, I believe that the house at 725 is about 11 and a half or so setback from the property line, whereas we are, 11 feet? From the upper story, we are 11 feet, around here somewhere. We are 11 feet 1, so we're about 3 feet, 10
Call it 4
different.
feet.
Well, call it 4 feet. Call it 4 feet.
It's 4 feet.
And we looked at lining that up, and what we did instead of lining it up was we carved away the square footage on the corner so that that house at 725 would not lose any diagonal vista across there, and we didn't feel that coming out the four more feet would in any way mess up the streetscape or, make it feel like it was too close. We could move that back 4 feet. There would be a consequence in the connective part, that is bedroom and bedroom with powder room and closet. There would be some consequence in this stripe of space from here to here, which we can do nothing but take the 4 feet out of there. And I realize that's our problem on our side of the table. The parking on other projects, I think both David and staff, and Stacy, you mentioned it too, the third parking space, and I appreciate, Phil, the impact, the sense that all of these neighborhoods are lacking in parking and everybody seems to be dumping their car wherever. The way that this family would use it, and I imagine even two separate adult families would use it, is the family that's living in the 650 square feet downstairs is using the parking off Pierce, and the family that's living in Gateview is using the parking off Gateview. That's 2 parking spaces. I wouldn't know why we would assign a third parking space on Pierce. There's not any logic unless there's this future that the neighbors fear, which is somehow the house gets divided up even Steven. And that's not this family's intent, and that's not the intent of the architecture. I don't think it shows that.
But you understand, and you've been through this before.
Oh, this could be cut up.
It could be cut up. They may leave in a year, and we're stuck with it.
We know that.
And, well-
But that's what deed restrictions are for, and those are the same standards that everyone else is held to. On other projects where we can agree as space planners that there is a way to get a third parking space. Of course, there is a way to do it. We can widen the garage. We could lengthen the garage. I could scoop out more without making it wider. I could make this garage deeper. I could drag the front garage door back, and we could get a parking space from the property line to the front door, as you have asked on other projects that we've submitted before you. So there's more than one way to address the desire to try to get one more space off the street. And again, this applicant didn't necessarily want to have two tandem spaces, and most applicants don't, but many of my single-family clients, that's exactly what they have, and that's the only choice they had. They've been parking in their side yard tandem, and you make the parking exception for them all the time. So I know that we can go there. I know we can go there.
I understand what you're saying. I just can't believe it's coming from you. This street is unusual in the fact that the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. People park. Let me finish. People are parking. I mean, the one neighbor had her car sideswiped 4 times last year.
Yeah.
This street is different, and that's why they illegally park on the sidewalk. just to get out of the way. And so
Most
just
of the time I did
asking.
that too.
But asking for the exception, I don't know if it's a service to your client. This is a huge impact here. This street is unusual. I think that's.
Fair enough.
Solano Avenue, Marin are not like this street because there's plenty of room.
Would you feel be more in favor of a side-by-side situation regardless of how we resolve it? Is that your preference as opposed to looking at kind of a regressed garage with a deeper cut for the second spot? Is that the preference?
My goal is to at least inform you to make an educated decision here.
Well,
And
I
I think it's.
got to take it back to my clients. Obviously, we
I
worked
think
on
it's
this a bit.
disingenuous to say, let's give a parking exception because we can, when in this case, I think, given the situation.
And with consequence.
It has a major consequence on everybody on the street. And
I think that's an
it's-
overstatement, but that's,
it's not an overstatement because I deal down there a lot. And I see what goes on down there. I see how many cars are hit, how many reports we get about cars being hit and run on that street. I think that if you want to go for it, then let's not call it an exception. Let's call it a 649 square foot secondary residential unit, and you're only required to have one parking spot for it on Pierce. What happens up on Gateview happens on Gateview. If that's the way we go, that's the way we go. But I'm trying to, with all my heart, and I'm telling you, I think it's a big mistake not putting a second off-street parking spot here when you have the opportunity to do it. Just ask the neighbors, would they like to have a second street off-street parking spot here? They would kill for it. The issue also about this, the garages being out over the property lines because the property lines were adjusted. Before, that's where the street was, and then the city came back and wanted to widen that street. Well, they can't widen it because those are there unless they buy them out and tear them down. But starting with a new building, regardless if it's 649 or it gets moved into a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit, I think not having that second off-street parking is a major mistake in this street, in this area. And if you don't believe me, go ask the neighbors about parking.
no, that wasn't ever my take on this. This was a conversation we had with the applicant
Yeah.
about whether or not it made sense to try to develop financially. The width of the curb cut would be wider, which means there would be less or no opportunity to even do what other people do on this street, which is park however you will, whether you're parking during the day legally or whether you're pulling, 2 wheels up onto the curb so that you avoid the hazard of the street. I don't know what happens to this street when you develop the park across and you start to have more traffic towards this street as opposed to using it as the thoroughfare that it is right now. And I don't know what plans you have, at large, and maybe staff can speak to that because if there's a traffic problem now, there's going to be a worse problem, and it's not going to be because we added 1,600 square feet to a house. It's going to be because there's a park across the street. So I don't want to take all that weight. That's all I'm saying. And the applicant wasn't looking to force himself to buy that second spot.
So there's inconsistencies, and so what we're trying to do is understand, so what you're telling us that the client wants is not necessarily what's drawn nor what you're asking for in the application. You're saying they want one large house, but you're asking for 2 houses, and then you're asking for the parking variance for this, sorry, not variance, use permit. Exception. For the second space. And so I think, if I'm understanding correctly, that if you were to be willing to show this as a 650 square foot apartment, as in your application, then it's easier for us to approve the parking exception. I believe all of us are willing to approve the variance. We just need to understand exactly how far the house is sitting back from the street. I would be an advocate for pushing it back the 4 feet or whatever it is to be consistent with the rest of the street. I think that would be respectful to the neighbors as well. Would you agree with that, Phil? Would you agree with?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the downstairs is 792 square feet going on to the 1,609 square feet. Is my math.
Yeah, there's a 691 square foot addition on the lower floor that's all new. And then there's 101 square feet that is at the level of the existing lower floor. So you combine those two, and I guess that's how you're getting, is it 792, something like that? Is that what you're getting, about 792?
792.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly right. It's split up into the two components, one added to the existing house at the existing level, and then all of the other is added.
So that would drive, that big of an addition requires a second parking spot for the upstairs, up unit.
That's why we're
Yeah.
talking about an exception.
Yeah. For the up, the Gateview.
Do you
unit.
want a second
Right.
parking space? I mean, a third one?
Where's the third one?
We'd have to develop it side by side down at the lower level,
Two on the lower level.
two on the lower level.
And one up above.
Yeah, there's no way to get a third one above. I mean, it's just, you look at the house plan, it's just not even possible.
Well, I think we're giving you a way to provide only 2 parking spaces, and that's if you were to show us a site plan, a floor plan that had a second unit.
Yeah, I mean, we
Well, no,
did
it can't.
show that, but honestly, that is not what this applicant was planning
You
to
keep
use
saying that, but that's what you've asked for in your application. So what your application is saying doesn't coincide with the floor plans.
No, because we are allowed not to sever the two. We are allowed to show it just this way. If you need to have an intervening door to prove that, we'll add the intervening door right here. We are allowed to do this. We've done this, we did this, Dawn Kawamoto's house has a stairway down to an existing space that is less than 650 square feet. It's part of the existing house. And the ordinance doesn't differentiate between whether something is developed within an existing footprint versus something new.
I understand. I guess what I'm asking for is if it has a separate address, there needs to be some.
I don't need it to have a separate address. He'd like that for mail, he'd like that for garbage, but I don't need to have it. But there already is precedent for that on the property immediately to the south. They've got 2 addresses and it's one house. Unless I don't know that it's 2 units, and you don't know it's 2 units, but it's got 2 addresses. It's got a Pierce Street address and a Gateview address. And I don't know that they get mail at both of them or garbage at both of them, but it's posted as both.
Is it one continuous house?
One continuous house. It's right next door. So, but I don't need it, and I don't think he needs it to have a Pierce Street address. But I agree that there are other arguments to have a Pierce Street address. It's more logical.
If the through lot had, to the south of you had the same, it came for us, would they get the same, they would get the same questions. It's not any different
Oh,
here.
no, I realize that, please.
But again, I'm trying to get to where you want to be, and that's where we're trying to decide how to curve this into our code to make it code complying. And if we have to do an exception, we do an exception. But again, to grant an exception, you know the rules, and that is there's something that restricts you from doing a second parking spot.
Sure.
And so it's on the applicant to tell us why they can't get a second parking
Sure.
spot. It's just not because it's difficult.
Sure.
I want 2 stairs or,
Sure.
and that's where I come from. I mean, I've got to be a little tough about some of these because
It's
it's
fine.
very confusing how to get you the full house, which I think is actually a better solution than a restriction and a secondary dwelling unit.
Well, I think-
Then I don't have to worry about the
Phil, I
neighbors
think
coming back to me
We
saying,
agree with you.
you know what happened? They didn't put the door in and now it's one big house. And that's the issue, so. But I agree, I think that now that I look at this more closely, that this could be pushed back a little bit without any problem here. And, this part here
Yes.
could be filled in and
Yes.
reduce the overall impact to the neighbors.
I think it should be. I guess what I'm confused about is are the applicants asking for 2 units so that they can down the road rent out 1 unit, or are they asking for a single house that's got 2 kitchens?
Yeah.
I'm looking for clarification on that.
Yeah, and when the kitchen is 35–40% of the 649 square feet is kind of interesting. I mean, it's a nice kitchen. It's a nice layout.
So I would be interested in the history of other projects that maybe had 2 units that weren't severed. And I understand in-law units and repair units and community to having this. And so I want to make sure that I understand historically what's been.
Yeah. We did
Approved in
approve
Albany.
one, in fact, Jason was the architect on it, on the 1000 block of Evelyn, where the owner converted the lower level to a secondary dwelling unit. She had sufficient parking in the rear yard. It is attached to the main house, and there's an interior stairwell that connects it with a door that separates the space.
So there is a door.
Yeah.
Yeah, but see, again, and I apologize, but if it's inside the existing dwelling unit, to me, that's different than adding to the rear yard or adding on outside of the existing structure. And I know, I prefer to have them attached rather than separate units. But I think that using that as an example here is a little, just apples and oranges here.
So are you, just for clarification, are you asking for 2 separate units so that your clients could down the road lease the smaller unit should they choose to? Or are you asking for
They need 2
one?
units in order to have 2 kitchens.
Right.
That's what they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and what they're doing is being honest and telling us that they don't, that they plan to use the unit plus the bedrooms up the hallway, even though those bedrooms aren't technically part of this unit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what they could have done is just came in here and showed us the ADU
Exactly.
plan for the 649, and we'd approve it, and they'd go on their merry way,
Right.
and
No,
suddenly that wall would go away.
No, that's exactly why I would like to try to make this work. Well, first thing, just off the cuff, I'd move that door on the master bedroom. Having it right next to the stairwell, or have a couple of stairs, limits what you can do there.
Okay,
But,
let's take some action here. But Jason had something to say.
Yeah, I think it's in their interest to go for the third parking space and to have the house that they want to have. And the fact that we have a credible plan that another owner down the road could sever into 649 square feet, and then the rest of the house is used that way, or another family wants to do the same thing they do, which is blur the boundary between the two. I don't think you're subverting your ordinance to create a 650 square foot second dwelling. I think you're getting that anyway. If the concern is that someone truly severs it and rents out whatever the half and half is, that could be happening today, and we know nothing about it. And the way you would action that would be a neighbor would complain, and you would go in and do an inspection, and a correction notice would be issued. That's how you deal with that. So I don't see the detriment to approving a plan that is showing everything openly, exactly how this client wants to work it, but also showing it a way that someone who is going to follow the rules and renting something out not within their family could do it completely, credibly, and logically. It's a nice, I mean, that's a nice second unit at that 649 square feet. I mean, we
Well, I
worked
agree.
hard to get that to work.
I agree with your logic up to the point where you said, and they could rent it to somebody else who would use it the same way, because that's not for our code. Our code says
Oh,
if
you
you're
mean-
renting an accessory dwelling
No,
unit.
no, what I mean is that they would close it
To an-
off.
to
They would
an-
close it off at 650 square feet and rent
Okay.
it that way. Rent it
Because
the
if
way
you're
the
renting to an
ADU.
unrelated, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
family and has a separate unit, separate rental altogether, our code is quite clear that there's a limit of 650 square feet.
Well, and the issue of the address.
And we could bring that up when we talk about
The
housing.
address is not an
We
issue.
don't
Don't
need
worry
the
about it.
address,
That's
but
not
I
an
did
issue.
face the front door of the second unit to the side, not to the street, to
Right.
make it subordinate. And he would like to have trash and mail and things on Pierce Street. But if that's not in the cards, that's not in the cards.
All right, let's move this forward for some type of action, make sure there's no other public comment on this one.
We would
and
be willing
get
to
going.
work with your recommendations and staff's review of your recommendations for an approval tonight.
And I think in the long run, you'd be much happier because it makes it flexible with what you want to do or what you can do with it, and not play games with this and have somebody come knocking on your door late at night wanting to do an inspection. We don't like doing code compliance. That's not what we're about.
And conveniently, the third parking space on the lowest level would not count towards the floor area ratio because its
Bunker.
average height is
Right.
under the ground.
There you
So,
go.
we don't have to worry about that. Okay,
And
Thank you.
we do.
Thank you.
I do appreciate that. I think that in the long run, a bigger unit down there is going to be much more beneficial than playing around with a 640 square foot second unit, because that gives you a lot more flexibility. Okay.
I'm going to ask and see if anyone else has joined us that is interested in speaking to this item. Okay.
okay,
Do I hear a movement?
sure. No, but you'll hear a motion to
A
approve.
motion.
I thought you were talking about moving the massing back on the upper level.
We will.
Okay.
I move to approve planning application 13-067 at 730 Gateway Avenue for design review and variance. Variance is to allow a reduced rear yard setback to 6'7" for garage or garages on the lowest level. The upper level of the new accessory dwelling unit fronting onto Pierce Street will respect a 15-foot setback, as is the pattern of the rest of the homes on Pierce Street. And that's it.
You don't want to make the windows?
Incorporating all of the other conditions and in particular the findings for the variance as outlined in the staff report.
Okay. I'll se-
If the homes aren't exactly at 15 feet, can we give them compliance to be in plane with one or split the difference?
Do you want to, if you keep the language general, that builds in some flexibility. So by saying keeping it in the same plane, I think that gives us.
Yes, okay, same plane as the adjacent
Okay.
dwellings.
Okay.
Or in particular, the one to the north,
Yeah.
which I think is closer to Pierce.
We could have a surveyor come back and shoot some lines from those houses so that we get something that's.
Great. Or 15 feet, whichever is greater.
And before you complete that
I
motion,
mean, less.
since it didn't include the parking exception, and there's been this discussion about adding the third space, do you want to make that a condition?
I think it's inferred,
Okay.
I think it's, yeah,
but we can make that clear.
I just, yeah, I think it's better to have
A
it
total of
clear
3
as-
parking
total
spaces
of
will be
There you go.
provided.
thank you. I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion passes pending a 14-day appeal period. Congratulations.
Always good to see you, Jason.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's a harder project than
It's a good project. It's a good project for Albany.
challenging stuff. We don't have to carry steep hillsides.
And you can send me a thank you after you build it and park in that 2 parking spots. You're going to really appreciate them.
You have it, so you know what it's like.
I have it, I know what it's like, and I tell you that it's invaluable.
Or when the park goes in and there's no more parking on the street.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So moving on to item 6C, recommendation to the City Council regarding adoption of amendments to the Planning and Zoning Code regulating fully animated electronic advertising signs. May we please have the staff report?
So the recommendation this evening is just to review some information I'm going to provide you. I'm sorry that parts of this didn't come together until today. To refresh your memory, first of all, the City Council at their October 21st meeting provided direction to city staff to implement, or not to implement, to proceed with the planning for a new Public Works Service Center at 540 Pierce. The funding strategy includes leasing a corner of the western side of the property for a digital billboard. The direction from the city council was to prepare amendments to the planning and zoning code to legalize that kind of a facility. At your last meeting, we presented to you a resolution of intention to amend the ordinance. The commission expressed clearly some concern about that and not necessarily supporting that concept. And as a result, I think that the outcome of that is we will present to you two different alternatives. One that would prohibit a digital billboard, and another which would essentially along the direction that you gave us. And then a second to respond to the city council would be an amendment that would allow, under certain criteria, a digital billboard. So first I'll show you what, and I can, I'll pass these on to them. And what I'm going to show you on the screen is just some edits to the, draft edits to the ordinance that we've prepared for your initial reaction. It's pretty simple and straightforward. First of all, defining a digital billboard. It's a definition that doesn't really exist in our, doesn't clearly exist in our code as it stands. And so two definitions are added. First is a definition for digital billboard, and the key word kind of being here an off-premises sign. And the second thing is being added is a definition of a franchise or relocation agreement, which is part of the package of criteria that would be required. And this is basically an agreement that would allow the city to require a billboard provider eliminate existing billboards in town in exchange for the right to construct a digital billboard.
How many billboards do we have in town? Does anyone know?
2 on the top of Montero's.
I know that, but are
I
there,
don't believe there are any others.
okay, clever.
There is actually one more, but it's kind of not a billboard. It's that palm reader that we've been asking to paint that
yeah.
over for years. Just throw that in there. Is there, so we lease this to a billboard company, so there's a lot of income to the city from this.
That's the only reason we're doing this.
Okay. And just want to make sure we're not giving the baby away with the bathwater.
Have you done any research, or do you know offhand what the energy use is on these?
I don't, although I'm going to show you in a second. One of the provisions that we're recommending is a criteria that requires, well, let me go through this.
Okay, sure.
That doesn't maybe exactly address
Sorry,
that.
maybe I'm
But
jumping ahead.
so to first of all, to show you what you asked for, which is on the list of prohibited signs to add digital billboards. And I think that makes it really clear that this kind of installation wouldn't be allowed anywhere in the city. To be responsive to the direction from the council, there's an alternative amendment which uses the same definitions. And by the way, clarifying the fully animated sign is an on-premises sign. We have a definition for fully animated, but it doesn't make the distinction whether it's on-premises, meaning it's for that. Let's say Golden Gate Fields has an on-premises identification sign.
They're advertising themselves.
Yes, they advertise the upcoming races. So going to the section that would establish the criteria for a digital billboard, the operational limitations on this would begin with CMX district only, so it's basically East Shore and Cleveland, oriented away from residential areas. C, oops, there's a typo, there's 2 C's. The first C is to shield or otherwise try to minimize any sort of catwalks or ladders or other access ways to the sign. The second C is that it's a static message only, so it's not like a YouTube video that's playing as you're driving down the freeway, and that it changes every 8 seconds. Well, the timing of the changes is coming up in a second. The installation would be subject to the franchise or relocation agreement that I mentioned. And so the practical implications of this language would be that we could only enter into an agreement with Clear Channel. And unless there was somehow another static billboard installed someplace, I don't think you could have another digital billboard. Item E is just a kind of a reference to compliance with state law, Caltrans requirements, and Federal Highway Administration requirements, all which regulate the safety of these things for the driver. Display time, a minimum of 8 seconds, and no more than a 2-second transition from one to the next. G is a criteria for measuring the brightness, and no more than 3/10 of a foot candle above ambient light.
And was this reviewed with the provider as well as some kind of standards?
This was reviewed both with the provider and looking at what other cities are doing.
Okay.
So it works. The provider provided what they would like to see, and then this beefed it up a little bit to address more conventional planning standards. But as an example, that height, the brightness of 3/10 of a foot candle would work for them, and the brightness would adjust to the ambient light during the day or evening, so it's brighter during the day, basically. Item F is that the commission would determine the appropriate height and placement on a parcel. G is to just define what maintenance is. If you recall some of our wireless applications, we've gone through the little exercise of what's maintenance and what's not. The intent here is to be clear that it's basically normal upkeep and repair, and to come in 5 or 10 years with the new modern technology 5 or 10 years from now is a new process. And then finally, H, to respond to Commissioner Arkin's question, the digital billboard shall employ the latest technology, whatever it may be, to ensure it achieves greatest energy efficiency possible, and also to require the operator to use the green power programs that are offered by whoever is providing our electricity. So sign up for the low greenhouse gas.
Right. So if one were to install an array of photovoltaic panels above such a sign, they might not only generate some, if not all, of the electricity that the sign is consuming, but it might shade that sign and actually allow it to be more visible.
Well, I like
But
your thinking, but I would like to also say incorporate them in the design of the sign, not just have them on top.
That would be even better.
I think it's a incentive to allow signs like that if we have even,
Yeah.
other signs to
I mean,
incorporate.
it's an interesting question. Do we require them, or do we, allow them and encourage them?
We can at the very least encourage them and give you the authority to require them if you want, or maybe if you really want to keep the thing as stealth as possible, you choose not to do it.
Right. Now, the particular proposal we're looking at actually has 2 of them splayed so that neither face is visible from any of the apartments on Albany Hill.
That's right.
So there is some, gap between the 2 that could theoretically be bridged and
There's some mass and
covered
bulk
with
to
TV.
it. Yeah.
We have, 3 of them now between Berkeley and Richmond. There's one at CBS Outdoors,
Right.
the racetrack, and then one at the Ranch 99.
All right.
Can I impart a funny story? I was sitting at the city of Berkeley one day, Planning Commission, and they got all over the billboard because they thought it was in Albany. And one of the city manager finally said, no, that's in Berkeley. And they thought it was Albany had done it.
Oh, that's great.
So it does make an impact, and I think that, I think that I don't want to see something like the one down on the Mercedes dealership down on 101 in Burlingame, I think it is. It's bright.
Belmont, yeah.
Or Belmont, yeah, that's really bright. And
Are you done? Yes. Well, I have to admit to having spent the week 2 weeks, keeping an eye out for these things. And then coming to a bit of an epiphany in that in some ways these could be better than a traditional billboard, which just coincidentally, I got a call from someone my brother does work for. My brother sells parts for these large printing presses, the printing equipment that does these large billboards, and one of his clients is a printer of this material, and they, through offcuts or misprints or whatever, end up with a lot of this PVC, polyvinyl chloride, vinyl sign material that they're having a hard time disposing of. And I thought this is really interesting that in a city where we've, taken, I think, one of the first actions to actually, maybe not the first, but, say no more vinyl siding, in part due to the environmental concerns of the manufacture, the use, the disposal, the burning of such equipment, that we are, close to creating a vinyl billboard ban in our community, or at least taking action that says we'll have fewer vinyl billboards and one that's perhaps, with this green power provision, better.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
And I think that, this may be, I hope not inappropriate, but I think that this opportunity gives us a chance to get some designs that integrate the billboard into a design rather than just have a pole with it stuck out. I'd like to see those go away and have something that's better designed and not just a
We
pole.
get a chance to see.
That's what I'm
they're
saying.
looking at.
That's a plus about doing this is we can integrate them somehow into the design.
So where I'm originally from in the Appalachians, there are these historic, beautiful vintage billboards that are illuminated with vanilla or coffee. And what's beautiful about them is the lattice work, or the ladders and they're reproduced now for train sets, and you can get authentic reproductions. And if this could be something that's designed well, that can become iconic down the road, then I think that I would agree with Commissioner Arkin that there could be a benefit. But maybe we could, like Target, like you guys push Target, maybe we could push the billboards to become something that's better designed than it is now.
I'm happy to do that. I'm sure they would just prefer to have a display, but that's why we do design review, is to get them to think
Opportunity.
a little bit out of the box.
Yeah, I think we can't be overbearing or require, a little, too much filigree, but I think within reason,
Yeah.
good design is an expectation.
Yeah.
All right, well, this probably makes the city council a little happier, and I think I also like the proposal that in order to be granted the ability to put one of these up, you have to take one or two down.
That's key to this whole concept for all of us.
I think what it does is it prevents the proliferation of these on parcels that are similarly sized when somebody says, hey, what about me?
Yeah, and that's, frankly, it's not just our idea. There's a government code provision, or I think it's a government code provision that allows cities to require this agreement.
Sure, I think it's a goal for a lot of places too.
And so a lot of cities are now requiring, the only way you get this is if you take other blighting, most of them being blighting, maybe not the ones in where you grew up, but most of them in the Bay Area tend to be kind of blighting.
Yeah,
Take those out.
and you're right, we don't have that many, but the two we have are pretty darn present in our primary intersection.
And they're not high value to Clear Channel, so they don't get really, it's not like a cool Apple.
Yeah, based on what's typically advertised there, that's.
Maybe above Montero's, we can get 2 Times Square type billboards going.
That's what I was saying. You need 10 of them, and then they kind of validate each other.
No.
we could have a little Times Square and.
So I'm
Santa
getting all
Ana
this to you
song.
this evening, so I apologize. Don't expect you to take any action on this, and maybe you want to wait for the other commissioners.
Okay, well, I think this was a good discussion.
But
And
it's
I
a good
appreciate
start,
knowing
and
where you're at.
maybe next week or your following meeting, we can bring this back to you.
So can you, one thing, I missed that last meeting, educate me, how many of these are we projecting on this CMX zone, or are we just going to limit to one?
Just one. It's basically the property that we're purchasing for the service center in order to make the project, in order to finance the construction of a new public works service center. We'll use the $150,000 a year or so that we think we're going to get from this to help pay the debt service. And it would be one pole or one installation with a display facing each way onto 580, not 80, but 580. And, you know, the height we'd have to kind of sort out with the operator and look at the landscape and other things that are going on there, but we'd bring all that back to you.
I hesitate to do this, but I think if this is going to come back in front of us, I'd like to see something from a sign manufacturer that shows us actually how these things work, what's required.
What do you, work in the terms of?
Size requirements, depth requirements, amount of power. If you can't do it, I can call some of my sign guys and see if I can get it.
No, we can call Clear Channel, they'll provide us that
Okay.
information.
I would be interested in exactly what their standards would be for something like this.
You're asking for a very particular sign being installed, or are you asking for language in?
I'm just curious about the specs.
I'm curious about the specs, if we have to modify our code to any further to say this, and this. For instance, a generator that they want it to run if the power's off. They require a generator.
I don't know.
How we're going to work with Amber Alert, things, you know, we tie into Amber Alert.
We would, as a part of that agreement, we would ask for, you know, any sort of an Amber Alert, other public safety or public service announcements, a certain percentage of time for those kinds of things, as well as if we wanted to, doing some kind of local business promotion or something like that. You can negotiate, it's pretty common, some modest percentage of the display time be available to those.
That's
local
more in the lease
businesses.
agreement, that's not in,
It's not in the zoning
It's not
code,
in
it's
the
in this
zoning code.
franchise agreement.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, neat.
But that would be pretty standard. I think actually the really serious public safety things are taken for granted. So
Yeah.
if there's
I think they're state law, but
Hmm?
they're state law, I would guess, for the
probably
users
so.
of these, but, you know, it's,
They've said
imagine,
it's not an issue at all for
yeah,
them.
I imagine the programming for the signs done off-site, so they just tie into it through the internet and program it.
Okay, and I was also going to make a suggestion that, you know, in lieu of adding digital to the list of prohibited signs, that we maybe add the, you know, replaceable vinyl to the list of signs that are prohibited.
Great.
Okay,
Okay, moving on to item 60, establishment of working group, members of the Traffic and Safety Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, and Sustainability Committee to prepare policy alternatives to residential parking requirements.
Yeah.
This is a good task force.
So the city council recently, a couple of members of the city council recently asked for kind of a quick report on Measure D, which was provided to them at their last meeting, and they've expressed an interest in the possibility of preparing some language to be submitted to the voters on an upcoming ballot. And they've asked that your commission and the other two committees collaborate on preparing some language over the next few months for the city council to consider. There's also some research we need to do into the environmental review that's required for something like this, whether or not CEQA is required, and what the process is for getting on the ballot, whether it's something the city council can do, or whether a voter petition is required. The first step in all this is to determine how many of you want to participate in such a group. What we're proposing to you and what the council approved is for you to self-select the number of you that want to participate. And if it's more than two, we'll simply, that's great. We'll notice this working group special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you can have 3, 4, 5 of you, if you're interested, participate. Since it is such a critical issue, and I know it would be hard for all of the groups, I think, I think everyone would be interested in the discussion. Wherever they stand on the issue, it's one that everybody will want to participate in. The other thing that we'll try to do is coordinate some of these meetings with your meeting or their meeting, so that it's, at least for someone in the room, it's not another meeting.
Yeah, we did have one joint meeting with these groups on this topic, so it's in many ways, we're continuing
That's right.
that process.
The one thing I would say about this process is it's focused specifically on residential parking and the Measure D, and trying not, it's easy to get distracted into residential parking permits or commercial parking, all those other things. It's just really to say whether or not to put something on the ballot and what the pros and cons
And
of it.
what it might be.
Okay.
Got it. All right.
Would it be worth continuing this item to next week so that we have 2 other commissioners voice them, and the 5 of us could
Sure.
compare schedules?
Sure.
Or unless.
Yeah, I may not be here next week, so,
Well, are you interested?
but I am interested, and I think I was, one of the primary people who asked for that earlier meeting, and we'll probably not only have this committee, but maybe try, as you said, to convene all 3 of the bodies together, maybe at a point when this committee's ready to roll out the idea and have a good discussion.
I think this will move pretty quickly. If the council has asked for us to give them the possibility, at least, of putting something on the ballot for 2014, they need to make that decision next July. And so they're asking for a report by May, a final report with pros and cons
Okay,
by May,
that's-
and an
that's very
interim
reasonable.
report by, say, February. So you maybe have December meeting, a January meeting, and then report to councilmen and a couple more meetings.
No, that seems very doable, and I'm glad to know it's not any longer than that.
Yeah, I would like also, I'm very interested in serving on there. Actually, I had an idea that we can reduce the size of a second parking spot. They provide a charging station for it.
Or maybe just second parking spots are smaller.
Yeah, smaller, but then a charging station, because most of the,
And I don't know as we need to change the ordinance in order to make
We
the
don't.
size of the space smaller. We need to change the ordinance to make the size of the space smaller, but that's not a Measure D.
no, our ordinance will allow us to make it smaller.
Pardon?
The planning commission has discretion to make the
Right.
parking smaller. So we don't need that. I think it's if we're going to reduce requirements, but unless you're not here. Just out of curiosity, last time I had done this, if I remembered correctly, if it was a voter initiated measure, we did not require CEQA. Now, I don't know if that still stands, but
That's correct. If voters, if a group of people stand in front of Safeway and sign the petition, that does not require CEQA. Whether or not a council initiative or, would require CEQA is going to require a little bit of research on our part. There are some reforms to CEQA that have been made over the last few years that say, no, you're not required to do a CEQA review on parking. The parking inconvenience is not an environmental impact. It's just an inconvenience. There was a Court of Appeals ruling in San Diego County that went the other way on that. And then just recently, in this year, the legislature passed a new law that kind of goes halfway in between. And so we need to consult with the city attorney and study all this to give you some parameters about what the council can do, or in a kind of a formal sense, and what has to happen in a more political, grassroots kind of process.
Okay. I am not able to serve, unfortunately, my schedule is not going to permit it, but I think we should see if Commissioner Donaldson or Commissioner Pilch might have interest.
Okay.
Great.
Do we need to agendize that or just continue
We'll
this?
we'll put it on the
next?
agenda so we
Okay.
can continue
No,
the
at the
discussion.
next meeting, we'll mention that David would like to serve, he'll serve, and if somebody else would like to join us,
Did you, yeah.
that's great.
Actually, now I realize we have, several agenda items, so I may actually be here after all.
We can set them up in a way that's convenient for you so you can bail out after.
There would only be 2 items, the Ales Unlimited and 1008 Ordway. So we can,
Right, and then.
we can arrange the agenda so that
UC.
those items go first and you
Okay.
can
That works.
enjoy your evening.
Okay.
I have
So-
a question for staff when we get to that point.
This item is wrapped. We already have gone through announcements and next meeting items while we were waiting earlier.
Given that the governor did not sign AB 1332, I think it is, I know some of the cities are talking about either putting on a ballot measure or trying to do something like that. Has Albany considered that at all? This is the inclusionary housing for rental property.
There is, we haven't talked about it, but we're kind of distracted.
I haven't seen any movement since September on it, so that's why I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think there is one more case that's before the California Supreme Court that, on this inclusionary requirements, that will be potentially important. And then the kind of the framework that we have to work within will
Be better
presumably
defined,
clear to us.
yeah.
But that's something that I'm trying to stay on top of, and we can ask our colleagues that we get together with every month, if anybody in the county, at least we can ask others in the county if they're working on that.
Okay. Just wondering, this is a hot topic for me. I have a client that's gone through it, and that's why I kind of am hearing from another city what they're doing, and I was wondering if you were considering doing anything else.
I'll send you an email. I got an email alert recently. I'll just send it to you.
Okay.
You can get some.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.